Hello again and welcome to another little showcase video, this time for my Bretonnian army. Now, this video might come as a little bit of a surprise to you, including myself, because I wasn't actually planning on making this at all, mainly because I already did a Bretonnian army a couple of months ago. But at the same time, I only did a small work in progress shot and I didn't really tell you much about the army itself. And since I'm a crazy person, I decided to go and rebase both my Bretonnian and Dogs of War armies over the last week. So I've been rebasing about 600 models in the last 5 days. So as a result, I had the Bretonnian army all set up. So rather out of the cabinets at least. So I figured I might as well go ahead and do a little showcase video for it with the new bases and tell a little bit about the army itself. So Bretonnia was my first army that I ever collected for Warhammer. I started this one back in 2005 when I painted it in original color scheme of orange and yellow because I wanted it to look like the English Braveheart army from the movie Braveheart, which yeah, it didn't look too great to be honest. I didn't use any primer or anything like that, and orange didn't cover all that well. So it didn't look fantastic. It was, okay for a 15-year-old, I suppose, but yeah, nothing to write home about really. So it was about 2 years ago now. I decided to go ahead and repaint my Bretonnian army. I stripped off the paint of most of the models and set about repainting it. And I went with the, classic Bretonnian color scheme, with lots of variation between the knights and lots of murky browns and grays and stuff like that on the peasants, as you can see here. I did rebase the army 2 years ago using a dark green-ish basing mixture with some rocks in it, but I wasn't quite happy with it because I felt that the grass was a bit too dark and there was too many rocks, so it didn't really look like the European battlefield that I was really aiming for. So I decided to mix up some more basing material by myself and have another go at it, and I'm pretty happy with this one. So I think and hope I will keep it like this. But yeah, one thing to point out here is that all of the models that you see here are from the 6th edition Bretonnian release. Some of the models were released actually during 5th edition, but they were all part of the 6th edition range, so they were sold in store at that point, so that's why I have them featured here. So what you see here is only about 20% of my total Bretonnian collection. I have a lot of Bretonnians. The total army is about 1,200 models, as you could see in the work in progress video that I showed last year. But I have sold quite a lot of the models since and bought some new ones that I like better. So it looks a bit different now in its setup. I haven't painted anymore since then, apart from a few characters. But I'm going to show those in a later video. But for all intents and purposes, this is only the 6th edition part of my Bretonnian army, which I'm going to showcase now. And then I'm going to showcase the 5th edition and 3rd edition and third-party models in later videos as they get painted, but that's probably going to be a while. Anyway, let's start going through the units one by one. First up here, we have a unit of mounted geomen, or mounted squires, as they were known back in 5th edition. For some reason, Games Workshop decided, you know what, let's make 18 different poses of mounted geomen, because that's reasonable. I mean, who doesn't need 18 different poses of geomen in their army? Nobody, that's who. But being the collector that I am, I felt that I wanted to have all of them, and so I did. It took many, many years to find all the poses, but I did eventually. And yeah, what you see in front of you is the total collection of mounted Geoman poses ever released by Games Workshop, which I'm pretty happy to have. These are really rare by today's standard. Next up, we have the Bretonnian Field Trebuchet, which was the only War Machine released during 6th edition for them. They didn't really have any in 5th edition, though they had several in 3rd, ironically enough. I really like this model. It's a very thematic model. It has like a small diorama feel to it with the crew cutting up the chunks of masonry there to make it a little bit easier to throw them. You have the guy who is sort of getting ready to release the rock itself. Then you have the field warden, who is a bit blurry there in the back, who seems to be yelling orders. And you have the small boy there in the front on the wheelbarrow who is, shooting rocks at probably not the enemy unless they're very, very close. So it's probably just up to no good there really. But yeah, really like this model. Here we have a unit of peasant bowmen, 24 of them, without any command group models, because I didn't really feel like I wanted any, essentially. I never played with command models for them. And they came in 4 different poses with 8 different head options. Originally, I only used the helmeted head options and mixed in some from the Men-at-Arms kit. But when I redid the army, I decided to mix in the other heads as well for more variation, and it does give the unit a lot more character. These really look like, dirty, downtrodden peasants that they are. I used a lot of different colors for these guys, a lot of different browns and greens and stuff like that. I think there's about 12 or 15 or so different colors that I use for their clothing. So there's a lot of variation to them. It doesn't make them very quick to paint though, but it does make for a nice end result, I think. And here we have my Men-at-Arms. This is actually the first box of Warhammer miniatures that I ever bought. The champion itself is also the first Warhammer miniature I ever painted. And I did buy about 4 boxes of Men-at-Arms in total, but I ended up selling the rest because I only really needed to have 1 unit. And I know 25 models isn't a whole lot, but that's enough for me in this case. I have bigger units of Men-at-Arms from other third-party models, so I'm happy with the ones I have here. These ones were painted again with a lot of different shades of browns and greens and reds and such. And here we have my Grail Relic and the Battle Pilgrims or Grail Pilgrims. I have 2 of every pose. There are 9 poses in total, plus the Grail Relic itself. And these ones are even crazier in terms of color than the Peasants, because every single one of them have their own unique color. So there is no repetition in the color whatsoever. Every single brown and green and such and gray, it's unique on every single model here. And we have the first of the knight units, the Pegasus Knights. I have 5 of them. I bought 2 of the old style Bretonnian battalion boxes, which gave you 3 Pegasus Knights in each. I have a 6th one, but I converted that one into a mercenary captain from a Luxor army, so he's not part of the Bretonnian army. But I think 5 Pegasus Knights are just fine and dandy, so I don't really feel I need to have even more of them. These only come in a single pose, so you only actually get 1 Pegasus body and 1 Pegasus Knight body. You can give them different helmets though, which I have, and there's a choice of 2 different heads for the Pegasus itself. And here we have my Knights Errant, first of the regular knight units. I didn't actually have any Knights Errant when I first started collecting it because I thought that the Knights of the Realm were just plain cooler. I then did a Knights Errant unit painted to look like the Knights Hospitaller from the Crusades. Didn't use any unarmored heads, only helmeted heads at that point, and I gave them all hand weapons, which I converted. But then I decided to just make them regular Knights Errant, which is what you see in front of you right now. And here is my Knights of the Realm, first Knights that I ever painted. I had another unit of them, but I sold it later on because I don't really want much repetition in my army in terms of having identical sculpts. So I felt that 1 unit of 10 Knights of the Realm is more than enough because you only have 4 different bodies, 4 different legs, and 8 different helmets. So any more, and it's going to be lots of repetition in it, and I don't want that. So I'm happy with the ones I have. Here we have the Questing Knights, 9 models, all 9 unique poses that they made for them. I actually did buy 8 of the 9 poses back when I was around, 15. The 9th one, which is the left-handed knight in the right corner, the 2nd rank, he was kind of the uglier knights I found, so his haircut is very silly. So I didn't actually buy him back then, which I of course came to regret because he is really super rare, and I remember seeing him in the store and didn't buy him. But I did track him down on eBay many years later. I think I paid maybe $30 for him or so. So I do have him, and I am quite happy to have the full set of knights in that regard. And here we have my Grail Knights. I had about 9 of them. Yeah, I had 9 of them back when I was 15, and I didn't have a musician. And I actually converted the musician body into a paladin on foot, which meant that the model was kind of trashed. So I couldn't really use that torso to make a musician later on when I wanted to have a musician in the unit. But I was able to track down somebody selling the musician body and torso, legs and torso, on eBay. I think I paid about $10 for it. And so I did manage to get a 10th knight that way, and does have a complete unit with a complete command group set. This one also contains all the different poses. There were 6 of them in total, so there's a little bit of duplication there. I guess it would be 7 if I had gone with all the unique torsos, but at the same time that would also have meant that I wouldn't really have a complete unit. So 10 is good in that regard. And here we have the Green Knight of Bretonnia. I bought him fairly early on, if I remember correctly, and I have repainted him a bit since. Did some very basic glazing effects on his sword to make it a little bit greenish, and I printed out some paper banners that I designed myself in, I think, Paint or Photoshop or something like that. And here we have my Bretonnian lords or dukes, Theodoric of Brionne to the left and Bohemund of Baston to the right. Theodoric was the first lord that I bought. I think I bought him right up at the same time as I bought my first battalion, if I remember correctly. And he's been painted like this ever since, though I did strip the model and repainted him just to get rid of a little bit of that thick paint there. I did the same with Bohemund, which I bought a bit later. And here we have my battle standard bearers, paladins, with the Bretonnian army battle standard to be precise. The left one is the generic one that you could buy in a blister. The right one is the limited edition one that you can only get in the army box. And this is a bit interesting because back in 6th edition, you could normally only get the battle standard bearer model in the limited edition army box. But Bretonnia had this rule where they had to have a battle standard bearer in their army, which meant that they also sold them, as a separate kit. As a result, though, their limited edition battle standard bearer really isn't all that special. It's the same torso as the left one, as the original one, except that the sword has a little bit of a different angle and the helmet is different. The legs are also identical. And what's more is that the banner of the limited edition model is just a Grey Knight banner, but without the icon on it. It's just a flat surface. So it's really just a kind of lamer version of the Grey Knight banner in that regard. And I just put some, Grail transfer on it. I'm probably gonna go back and repaint to make it a bit bigger later on, but it is what it is for now. I'm glad I have both of them, and I didn't have to pay for the nose to get the limited edition one, so I'm happy with that. And then we have Luen Leoncoeur, the King of Bretonnia, and what is probably one of my favorite Warhammer models ever made. And I painted him to a tabletop standard without any real highlights. Yay. But yeah, I really like this model. It is fantastic. It has a lot of nice details, but it's not overbearing. The pose is cool. I mean, I think the only bad thing about it at this point is that Bequi, I think it's pronounced like that, the hippogriff itself is pretty small. It's barely bigger than a horse. So that this is supposedly be a terror-causing monster. It's a little unimpressive in that regard. But the sculpt itself is just fantastic. And the banner that you can see there is also printed. I designed it myself in Paint Photoshop and had it printed myself and just glued it on there with some PVA glue to hold it in place. And here we have my damsels, the Grail damsels, and the Fey Enchantress, whose face is kind of covered there by her right arm. I had 2 sets, if I remember correctly, of the damsels, but I ended up selling the other set because I didn't want to have any duplicates, and I did manage to track down the 5th edition models instead, which I'll show in a later video. The Fey Enchantress model itself is also pretty nice, though I don't think she really looks better than the damsels for some reason. I think it's a different sculptor or something like that. Not quite sure. It's still a pretty cool model though. And that was the showcase of my 6th edition Bretonnian army. As I said, this is only part 1 of, I'm not sure how many parts it's going to be, probably 4 or 5 or so, of my total Bretonnian army. And I guess once it's all completed at some point in the future, I'll, take a massive video of the whole thing, which is going to take me hours to set up because, like I mentioned, it's about 1,200 models, so it's going to take a while. But I hope you enjoyed this little quick tour. And like I mentioned in the Orcs and Goblins video, next up is going to be either Dogs of War or possibly Bretonnians. We'll see. It depends on what mood I will be in and what to paint. Anyway, see you in the next video. Cheers.